welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, we're going to have a very interesting show. We're going to be dealing with one of the seminal topics of our lives today, and that is our beautiful, dear, precious Mother Earth, our dear planet, which is on fire. Even the oceans are so warm, they too are almost on fire. The entire ecosystem is threatened, which literally means our own food sources are threatened, our water, our air, our soil. Well, today we have someone who has been working on this diligently for a number of years, personally and through his organization, Jon Schull. Let me tell you a little bit about him. His background is that he, with the Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, founded Eco Restoration Alliance, which aims to deal with climate change through the restoration of depleted soils and degraded habitats. Now, there are many different ways to approach the subject of climate change. I like to call it climate crisis, or as Robin Williams used to call it, global grilling. That is all part of what it is we're dealing with. And it's so serious that if we don't bring a little bit of levity, we may start crying. And then we might have an excess of water on the planet. That's not what we want. So I'm so glad, Jon, to have you with us today to elucidate some of the issues as you see them and some of the solutions that Eco Restoration Alliance is bringing to the table.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Good to have you. So first of all, when did you form ERA and what is its primary activity at the moment?
The Eco Restoration Alliance was started about 3 years ago when I became aware of a network of scientists and change makers and foresters and authors and writers who all recognized that the climate crisis is a biodiversity and a biosphere crisis. That for all of the emphasis on greenhouse gases and global warming, which is a big problem, now it's even clearer that it's a big problem, this being the hottest month of the hottest year on record.
Yeah, exactly.
That healthy ecosystems are the planetary air conditioning system. We talked about this a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago. It's still true, and it's still a minor theme in the ongoing discussion of climate change. But let me just review the basic proposition.
Yes.
We all know about greenhouse gases. We all know that the planet is heating up because we've increased the greenhouse gases so severely that they're capturing more and more of the planet's heat rather than allowing it to radiate out into
and
space.
Dissipate.
The obvious solution is to stop greenhouse gas emissions. It's obvious, but it actually isn't the solution. It's a solution in 1,000 years, in 500 years, and in 10,000 years. If we stopped emissions today, eventually, if life remains on Earth, it's likely to bring temperatures back down. But there's already so much carbon in our oceans that even if we stopped emissions today, the oceans would be outgassing carbon literally for centuries. The good news after that very bleak diagnosis.
So just to make a point on that, Jon, there is an enormous amount of emphasis on moving away from fossil fuels, for instance, which is said to be the big evil on our planet today. And while what they produce, carbon, pollution, is horrific from the point of view you're saying, reversing that actually is not enough to do what we need to do. So where I come from with A Better World, I don't say, don't do something about it, but focus on what you're about to say.
Right. Let me give you an analogy.
Yes.
If you or I were doctors, which we are not, And we were faced but with a cancer patient having a heart attack, we would not spend our time talking about carcinogens, which are responsible for the cancer,
Yeah.
or talking about chemotherapy, which is a long-term solution for the cancer. We would be dealing with the heart attack. The heart attack is the collapse of the biosphere, the collapse of the planet's beating heart and breathing lungs. That is the planetary climate control system. And like a heart attack, if you give it the right shot of adrenaline, you can turn it around really quickly, and the patient will live for another day and perhaps for long-term therapy to solve the long-term problem. That's the analogy.
Excellent analogy. Excellent.
Now, what
Long
is,
term, short term.
that's right. Near term, you need to understand that while it's getting warmer and warmer year by year from the greenhouse gases, we have a planetary air conditioning system. And it is breaking down really fast. And as you know, on a hot day, things are fine until the air conditioner breaks down, and then suddenly it gets really unbearable. The air conditioner works like this. I'm going to tell you how the air conditioner works because I'm also telling you how you can fix the air conditioner.
Wonderful.
Uh, the air conditioner outside my house has got a coolant, and it packs energy into the coolant, and then it moves that energy away from the house and it releases it into the environment. That's how air conditioners work. Household air conditioners release their energy right outside the house. So they actually heat up the planet even as they cool off the house. The planetary air conditioning system
Yes.
is a little bit smarter and a lot bigger. The planetary air conditioning system takes a very potent coolant that you may have heard of. It's called H2O. It's water. And it uses solar energy by way of plants to turn liquid water into water vapor. We all know that photosynthesis produces sugars by taking the sun's energy and taking carbon out of the atmosphere, but we're not going to focus on the carbon because for every carbon atom that plants pull out of the atmosphere, thank you for a long-term solution, they produce hundreds of water molecules which are released from their leaves into the air. And because water vapor is an invisible gas, it drifts away. And
Oh,
it tends to drift up, loaded with energy that would have heated the planet's surface. Now let's just pause right there and say, thank you, air conditioner.
yes.
Um, the greenhouse gas layer does indeed capture heat. That heat radiates from the surface of the earth. If you walk barefoot in the summer, you know that walking on bare ground or pavement will burn your feet. Walking on grass will not burn your feet, and walking in the woods is like walking in an air-conditioned paradise.
It's
That's the air
cool.
conditioning. It's cool. And it's not just cool because of the shade. It's
Mhm.
cool because you're walking under the leaves of an air conditioning system, which
Oh,
is
I know.
capturing
You're
heat.
walking on water.
You're walking on water and you're walking underwater that is carrying energy up to the sky. Now, as I said, an air conditioner needs to release that heat if it's going to
Yes.
reuse the coolant. Well, the air conditioner, the planetary air conditioner, releases that heat by condensing water vapor into clouds. When it gets hot enough and cool enough, and with the help from plants that are also releasing not just water vapor, but tiny molecules called aerosols,
Hmm.
things like the terpenes that make the pine forest smell like a pine forest, things like pollen, and things like bacteria that are released by every leaf. Those bioaerosols change the condensation point of water and seed clouds. This is incredibly powerful.
Oh
These
my
days,
God.
the
Truly.
um, the ski resorts that are making snow put
Yeah.
this same bacterial protein into the ice making machines
Really,
because
the
it
snow
causes
making. Yes.
snow making because it makes more
Oh,
snow faster. Well, nature is pumping these aerosols up into the sky, so it makes more clouds faster. Let's get back to planetary cooling. Now
yes.
we've got clouds and they're making shade. And of course, all of those now condensed water droplets under the influence of the bioaerosols condense and they become rain. And that rehydrates the land, soaks into the ground, and provides another round of water cycling. That's the
Hydrologic cycle. Hmm.
that's the small water cycle. But there are two additional consequences, which are just fascinating and wonderful. One is that all of the energy that we talked about being taken away from the soil
Yes.
is released again at the cloud level. But because it's at the cloud level, much more of that energy radiates out into space, actually cooling the planet.
Oh.
But wait, there's more.
Okay.
Water vapor
Good.
versus a droplet. If you take a, let's say, a cubic inch of liquid water and you vaporize it, first of all, let's think about how much heat it takes to boil a cubic inch of water. It's
Hmm.
real energy.
Yeah.
But now let's also talk about the volume of the water vapor. It is 1,200 times the volume of the liquid water. So there's this big volume activity going
Mm.
on. And when that water condenses, it makes a vacuum.
Oh,
Forests are
really?
generating fresh vacuums wherever they exist. And into a vacuum flows additional oxygen, additional air, and water. The trade winds are
Amazing.
probably powered by this mechanism, which is known as the biotic pump, um, uh, theorized by Viktor Vorshkov and Anastasia Makarayeva, two Russian scientists. They've been talking about it for decades. He's now dead. She's still a champion of this theory. Over time, it's gone from a crackpot idea to a, yeah, probably true. And over time, it's going to come to be recognized as a driving force of weather patterns.
Are you suggesting that the vacuum would create the uh, the effect of wind?
Yes, it sucks wind in from neighboring areas. And each of these events of cloud formation pulls laterally
Fascinating.
moisture and air, producing wind and rain. Listen, the standard story about the large water cycle says ocean water evaporates and it goes over land and it condenses, and that's where the rain comes from. You know, we have very big continents. If that was all there was to it, we
Hmm.
would have deserts in the middle of the continents. But we don't. If you actually look at moisture in the air and moisture in the soil over the boreal forests, it's actually constant all the way across from sea to shining sea. Why? Because the rain doesn't just come from the oceans. The rain goes down and up and down and up and down and up and over.
Hmm.
And so there's this fairly steady layer of recycled water to the
Yes.
extent that, for example, in the Amazon, where they measured this precisely, 4/5 of the rain that falls in the Amazon originated in the Amazon. It's recycled water going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, pumping energy up and out, up and out, up and out, and up and out. And of course, sequestering carbon, feeding the animals, feeding the humans,
Yeah.
providing the planet with a daily pulse of oxygen, carbon sequestration, cooling, and life nurturing water.
Water.
This is the planetary climate control system.
Wow.
You'll notice I had very little to say about carbon there.
Yes.
And it's not because carbon is not relevant. In fact, carbon is hugely relevant. Living
Yes.
carbon is the solution. Plants and animals
Yeah.
are the solution.
We are carbon based.
to dead atmospheric carbon, which is indeed a problem. However, as I may have mentioned previously, it's going to take centuries to bring down levels of atmospheric carbon, but it can take mere years or decades to cool the planet. The air conditioning system kicks in really quickly. Think about walking on bare dirt
Right.
in the summer. Think about planting seeds and plants there. The next year, same time, even if global warming has increased the ambient temperature by, let's say, 0.1 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
the actual temperature on the ground is going to be down 10 or 15 degrees because, as we have noted, vegetation acts as a cooling system. And you can make that change happen in one damn season. This is a
Okay.
fast acting,
Yeah.
quick solution to a short term crisis. And incidentally, it's also the slow acting, long term solution to the carbon in the atmosphere problem.
So it's both short and long term
It
in
is
one
both
shot.
short and long term. That's right.
And I believe that would also generate the other thing we need beyond water, which is food.
Of course.
So, in a sense, again, we have a solution, and I want to hear more about the details of it, of course. But in one shot, nature being the brilliant intelligence that it is, allows for one thing to dovetail with another, not siloed activities, but
Right.
utterly integrated ecosystems working, if you will, hand in hand with each other, with each aspect of what nourishes life.
Right.
That's
And
what I
of
hear
course,
from you.
this is not just a remarkable accident. We wouldn't be here. We are a part of this system. It took billions of years to work all of this out.
Yes.
And in the last instant of those billion years, we've disrupted it. We humans have the
Yes.
power to restabilize it very quickly if we pay attention to and if we build on the mechanisms that nature built over the last 3 billion years. If we simply say, techno fix, carbon in the atmosphere, let's stop emissions and switch over to energy, some people are going to make money in the short term through the energy transition, and that will not solve the problem. The biosphere will collapse and we're in deep weeds.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're not in deep weeds. We're in the absence of deep weed. What
That's
we
right.
need are
Yeah.
deep weeds in the wetlands, in the forests, in the grasslands, and that's how you fix the food crisis, the climate crisis, the temperature crisis, and incidentally, that's how you get resilience against elevated temperatures and against torrential downpours. When the ground is vegetated, the roots and the soil stabilize each other. And when it rains, the soil absorbs all of this water, takes it down into aquifers and into plant roots, and you don't have floods. And by the way, if you get a dry spell, you don't have fires because it's cooler and wetter. You have a vast reservoir of water.
But what do you do about runoff? Because the land in some places, John, as we both know, has become so hard and brittle that it will not absorb the water. Even if there's torrential downpour, it runs off.
Well,
So, what?
especially if there's a torrential downpour. So
Yeah,
let's talk about this for a moment.
sure.
So first of all, it's becoming obvious that we're getting more and more torrential downpours. The short-term reason for more and more torrential downpours is that the air is warmer. Warm
Yes.
air holds more moisture. And whereas in a healthy dynamic ecosystem, that moisture is tapped through bioaerosols by plants when and as they need them in appropriate amounts. In
Yes.
the absence of that, you're filling up these atmospheric rivers. There's no regulation. Eventually, the dam bursts up there, and it all comes down all at once. All right.
Yes.
So, and when it all comes down, it's landing, as you say, on dry and impermeable soil. So this is a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
Dry soil leads to boom and bust in water.
Mm-hmm.
Bust means you've got drought and the soil gets drier and drier. The bust means you get a torrential rainpour. What soil remains washes away along with the floods, along with the homes. And as it dries out, it becomes like baked clay, even less
Yes.
absorbent before. How do you turn this around? Let's spend the remainder of our conversation talking about how you turn
Okay.
this around.
Good.
If you're in an environment like the one you've just described, as are many people in desert areas, you're dealing with land that used to be grassland, but is now dry, baked hard, impermeable dirt, dead, dry dirt. It rains in most deserts, but that water evaporates soon after it hits the ground and
Sure.
has little long-term impact. So one of the simplest techniques in that situation is to say, how can we keep the water from evaporating?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is as simple as digging ditches. All right. So there's an organization called Just Dig It, which has popularized this technique. You can dig ditches counter to the slope of the landscape.
Mm.
And now water, instead of lying on an infinitely flat horizontal surface,
Oh,
it
yes.
settles in these troughs. And the troughs have got raw exposed dirt now. And so the water is not spread out thin, which is optimal for evaporation, but it's settling in these relatively cool, relatively deep, relatively dense ditches, and it soaks into the soil. 3 months later,
God.
seeds that have been laying for hundreds of years in the desert begin to sprout out of these trenches. And those seeds put down roots. And the next time it rains, there's a little bit more water and there's a lot more seepage into the root aerated dirt, which extends the absorbency. And you gradually reverse this vicious cycle by rebuilding an absorbent soil and vegetation, which grows exponentially because that's what living systems do, and begins to draw the water out of the soil, out of the recently refilled aquifers,
Mm-hmm.
launch it into the atmosphere, bring it back down to rehydrate the land. And
Yes.
so that's an example of how you can turn desert back into fertile, verdant soil. We tend to think that deserts are dead, dry dirt because they get no rain. The truth is, they're dead, dry dirt. I'm sorry. The truth is, they get no rain because they are dead, dry dirt. If you rehydrate the soil,
Yes.
the dirt becomes soil, the soil becomes humus, the plants become a green air conditioning carpet,
Yes.
and the process is reversed. We're dealing with a titanic struggle right now between two feedback loops: the vicious feedback loop of desertification and the virtuous feedback loop of rehydration.
So well put. Oh, it is so frustrating because, first of all, I'm just going to zoom out for a moment to highlight a point that you have made now a couple of times, and as have I, that there are two radically different but potentially convergent views on how to deal with this phenomenon we refer to as global warming, or they call it climate change, which is a phrase I don't care for at all, because I always say to people, if the climate did not change, we'd really be in trouble. So it's not the problem of it changing, it's the way it's changing. Anyway, enough of that. But the thing is, we can be going after the sources of the carbon manufacture, or we can go to the cooling cycles, which involves water, which is, by the way, what indigenous people knew all along. The ancient Chinese knew all along, and they focus on cycles of water. And that indicates the action of that biotic pump that you referenced before. And if we allow, and by the way, I want to also reference your presentation and ERAs at the Nigeria House during this past climate week, even though that's going to, settle this into a time space continuum here. That's okay, because it was brilliant. And I loved where it opened when you described the biosphere as one large, breathing, living organism, of which we are part. We
Right.
are not outside. We are not separate. We are literally part of the breathing of the life of the entire terrestrial biosphere.
Right.
And I
That
felt,
video, that
yeah,
video is actually on our website, and
yes.
I will give your viewers a quick look if you like.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
just because once you know what to look for, it actually becomes pretty apparent.
Yes. Yes.
So here we are. We may get some noise that we don't want. Oh, you would have to allow me to
I
screen share.
did.
Okay, I'll do it again. Here we all right, so here's the point. If you
Oh,
look,
wonderful.
right,
Yeah.
and if you look at a somewhat different time scale, day by day, you see that there are these bursts of clouds every day when the sun comes out due to this cycling of water. Um, every day the sun comes out, oxygen is released, water vapor is released, clouds form, and those clouds drift all over the planet where and if there is vegetation. So I told one particular story about how to deal with the worst case scenario, which is of a desert. And the answer is, you know, you work to get a little bit of water so that it will soak into the soil and to reverse this process. But we live in a diversity of ecosystems, and there are a variety of techniques. Remember, most of the planet used to be covered with forests and grasslands and wetlands, and now most of it is covered by degraded land, which is hotter and drier than before. But it's not all broken, and we still have a huge amount of biodiversity to work with. And when I say biodiversity, I don't just mean we got lots of animals and plants. The thing is that every ecosystem is not just where these plants and animals live, but it's where these plants and animals evolved. They evolved to
Oh,
work together, to cooperate, to create conditions in which life thrives. It's not enough to go and say, we're going to plant trees all over this mountainside. If you plant one species of trees, you're creating a tree farm in which those trees are actually competing with each other, and they're growing at a limited rate, and they're doing much less of the climate controlling that I talked about before.
I
If
see
you
where we're
add to
going
those,
here.
right,
Yeah. Native habitat, which is another real hallmark of the approach of Eco Restoration Alliance.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Please go
Because
ahead. This is
if
so
you
important.
if you actually do reforestation,
Mhm.
not just tree planting, what you need to do, and what people have shown produces 5 to 15 times the effect, is to plant in that soil the collection of co-evolved plants and animals that evolved in that soil. And suddenly, these critters are not competing with each other, they're working together. Different tree species specialize in different parts of the process, and they literally engage in bargains where one tree says, I got a lot of sugar, I need a lot of water. Other
Mhm.
trees say, I got a lot of water, but I need a lot of sugar. And the underground bacteria and fungi say, allow me to transact this transaction.
Yeah.
And so the systems, in ways that we're beginning to understand and will never fully understand, produce these synergistic effects, which have made our living planet the only living planet we know in the known universe. There may be others, but this is the only one we got. There
Yeah.
is no planet B, and we need to get with the program because we're not going to come up with our own program for this purpose.
Well,
So,
the other point is in what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a geographical specificity to the biodiversity that you're referring to, because in a given locale or bioregion, there is certain kind of ecosystemic activity, birds, plants, fish, what have you, and they are talking with each other, as you described, and the fungi and the bacteria, they're all in thriving conversation. But if you take, a species from outside of that geographical location and just tree plants, because we know that trees are good, you've disrupted actually that naturally occurring biodiverse habitat. And the results actually are, well, as you say, not what we're looking for
right. So,
ultimately.
a lot of the forests that have gone up in flames in the American West and in Canada, those are not native, co-evolved, complete ecosystems. They are replanted trees
So
in
interesting.
tree farms optimized for lumber. Well, that's great for lumber, but in fact,
Yes.
because it lacks everything else, those they do not engage in the rehydration. They don't produce the
Yeah.
regular rainfall. They don't provide the complete habitat. They go up in flames in an uncontrolled fashion. Indigenous species, and for that matter, indigenous people,
Hmm.
have learned how to work with nature, even with fire, so that some plants depend on fire in order to um, cause their seeds to become fertile. There are species of, but
Oh,
not these super fires, these regulated fires in humid environments. The
yeah.
point is, the science is fascinating. And as I said before, we will never understand it fully. But, and this is the existentially important closing point, we understand it enough to know how to save the future
Oh,
by working with nature and amplifying those wonderful and mysterious processes that we can learn from and learn about if we engage in ecosystem restoration while we still have the chance. If we don't, they're going to go away, we're going to go away, and we're going to miss, pardon me for saying so, the greatest story on Earth, which
oh,
is how our living planet does what it does.
yes. Well, you have elucidated it so beautifully, John. I so appreciate it. And I know others will as well. I mean, get cool and be cool.
Nature cools, get with the program.
Emphasize the cool.
That's right.
Which our youth want to do anyway, but here we have it actually grounded, if you will, in our way of being on the planet and using its cooling system, as you elucidated, to do so. Now, I'm going to ask you a very difficult and maybe impossible question to answer, but if we were to do this process of the digging of troughs and the native habitat and the other interesting methods that ERA talks about, of which there are several. Uh, how long do you think, if we were to really recruit largely, even if we were to take just the United States to start with, even though I know you're doing activities in Africa, in Panama, elsewhere, if we were to just take one bioregion to start with, how long do you think it would take to remediate, reverse,
Listen, we
restore?
are we have world leaders who are panicking right now over the notion that in 20 years temperatures may go up a degree or two. Let me remind you that if you revegetate bare ground, it goes down 10 to 15 degrees in 1 year. So the question is not how fast. The question is how broadly. People are doing this all over the world, but many more people are doing the old things, the old ways, and so it's getting hotter and hotter. If we invested the kind of money that you would invest if you realized that it was the way of ensuring that your grandchildren would have a good world to live in.
Yes.
We could do this in a decade. If we were to say, wherever I see brown dirt or degraded, overgrazed land, I'm going to turn it into vegetated grasslands and forests. It's going to cost a few bucks an acre. There are a lot of acres on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
but the immediate benefits are going to be apparent in the first season. The long-term benefits, to the tune of 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, are going to be apparent in a decade. The longest term benefits, which will include actually drawing down all of the carbon in the atmosphere, much of which is the decayed carbon from living systems that have been removed from the earth, bringing
Mm-hmm.
that down will take decades, but it's worth doing immediately. And it can be done very, very quickly, much more quickly than carbon cessation alone, that emission cessation alone can possibly do. Let me just mention a couple of things
Sure.
for the moment. So the challenge is not how quickly, it's how much. How
Mm-hmm.
broadly can we do this? And
Mm-hmm.
our challenge, therefore, is how do we get the world out? And with all due respect, Mitch, your audience is not on the order of the billions that we need to get this message to. So the Eco Restoration Alliance
We're
is,
working on it, John.
I'm working with you here. Um,
Yeah.
but one of the ways to do it is to try to get the world's attention by focusing on, call it strategic acupuncture points in the global economy. That's what has brought us to Panama. So let me
I
tell you a Panama story in case some of your listeners
please,
want to
please.
get behind an initiative that is designed to fix a genuine ecological crisis
Yeah,
in Panama, and designed to fix a genuine economic crisis for the world community,
sure.
and to fix a global attention crisis by saying, look, we know how to do this, it will work. Here's the story in a nutshell. The
Please.
Panama Canal, 50% of US shipping goes through the Panama Canal. It operated at half capacity last year because of drought. And the typical understanding is that the drought is because it's not raining. It's not raining because of climate change. But you are in a position now to say, yeah, but what causes climate change? And the answer is degradation of healthy ecosystems in the Panama watershed and in the Amazon forest, which provides a lot of the moisture that floats over the Panama watershed. We are creating a restoration lab in Panama City on the banks of the Panama Canal. And we're looking for some sugar daddy funders who would like to have the first global restoration lab for the study of how biology controls climate in Panama.
Mm-hmm.
We're creating the Restoration Lab in Panama City's City of Knowledge that will look at how biology controls the climate, will demonstrate how these techniques actually impact bioaerosols and rainfall, prove that the techniques will work in that kind of a tropical zone, and then act as the coordination point for the restoration of the entire Panama watershed and of the areas that bring moisture into the Panama watershed. Now, I got to say, I've come to love the Panamanian situation, the Panamanian people,
Yes.
uh, and that situation. But I'm frankly not doing this for the benefit of Panama. We're not in Panama because it's any more important than any place else, except that the world shipping community depends on it. And so if we can show that we can restore water availability and rainfall in the Panama watershed, first of all, the shipping companies and the governments that depend on a healthy canal are going to get back the 10 to 50 billion dollars they lost yet last year alone. But they will also come to understand that by working with nature, you can fix the climate just as by destroying nature, you broke the climate. And so there's an example of
What a
the,
story.
the strategic effort which is meant to improve the lives and livelihoods of the people who live in a degraded Panama watershed, or who are degrading it with uncontrolled grazing when they could be using cattle in much higher density environments and restoring the environment, to provide the Panama Canal Authority and the Panama government with huge amounts of revenue that they get from a fully operational canal, which they don't have right now.
Right.
To help policymakers who are concerned about global shipping security and the passage of ships through the Panama Canal, to recognize that they can address these issues while improving lives and livelihoods, and get the world to focus its attention on the simple fact, as I may have mentioned, that living systems in Panama and elsewhere control the climate. They respond very good to loving care and appropriately informed ecological restoration. And the Eco Restoration Alliance and the Restoration Lab that we're building in Panama is meant to bring this to the world's attention. People can go to ecorestorationalliance.org and learn more about what we are trying to do. When I say we, I don't mean me. I mean the global network of scientists, change makers, restoration experts, storytellers, and policy analysts who have come to recognize that there is a critical insight which is being neglected at our peril. And we are now trying to scale up awareness and action while we have the chance to advance the science, to advance the restoration. The next generation is going to have to become the regeneration generation, or their progeny are going to be cursing us till their dying days.
Oh, God.
I want to be a hero. I want the next generation to be
live.
the hero that actually saves the future. And they can do it. The people who are young today are either going to understandably become demoralized and realize that they've been dealt a difficult situation, or they're going to be re-energized and realize that they have the wherewithal and the opportunity to turn around the last 1,000 years of industrial mismanagement of the planet and ensure that this time we do it much better for generations to come. We need a program, and we're trying to develop the program that will empower youth all over the world, young people, climate migrants, crusty old men like you and me, to say, actually, this is our
How
opportunity to
dare
shine.
you?
This is our opportunity to shine.
Yep.
So I urge people to get with the program, find their niche on the only planet we have. And if they can help us mobilize the attentional resources like your listeners and viewers, or the financial resources like a few people in this organization, to
Yep.
reach out to me directly or to our nonprofit organization, the Eco Restoration Alliance, because we are ready to roll and time is short.
We'll put the website on the video for ease of people. That was beautiful, Jon. I so commend you and the work of Eco Restoration Alliance for the incredible work. I'm thinking, though, before I let you go, it's just occurring to me how exemplary it will be, I should really say, that the Panama Canal returns because it's been restored using the simple natural principles you've been discussing for the whole show. And that will be an undeniable example of how these principles are in action, and not the ecological, which we care about, but the economic benefit, which is the thing that catches most people's attention in this world. And
right.
Both will be restored. So what looks like the timeline there? Has some work begun in making the turnaround of rehydrating the canal at this point, or is it too new a project?
It's too new a project to demonstrate any effects. What we're doing is building the team, building the alliance. We have a wonderful location in Panama City of Knowledge available to us. We have partners in the form of a university called Geoversity. We're working with indigenous groups there and
Wonderful.
talking to the now national director of climate change, is the former partner of ours and executive director of Geoversity. So we have the connections and the relationships with a number of partners. We
Yes.
now need to put a foot in the ground, start by collecting the relevant data to show that these correlations can be turned into causations, use the causations to demonstrate that if you do the right things, you get the right results, and then do a significant job of strategic planning for a major restoration project of the entire Panama watershed. And that should have measurable impact in 5 to 10 years on the availability of water for Panamanians to drink and for Panama Canal Authority people to use to float boats from all over the world.
Float boats. We will float your boat. We will bring you into the flow. So, Jon Schull, thank you so much for all
My
the
pleasure.
work you've
Thank you.
done and what you've shared with us today. It's deeply meaningful, and I really hope it goes to the hearts and souls and minds of all those who are listening. So thank
My
you again.
pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed that and got as much out of that as I did, because that's
My pleasure.
it's really, it's world changing. It's world changing. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.